Welcome to Coco Maker Episode 4. I'm here with Eduardo and Karl, and we're going to be teaching you the basics of Coco. This week, we're going to be teaching arguments, loops, and Goto. But first, I forgot these few equations inside of Episode 2. It's add, subtract, add to what it equals, and subtract what it equals, and you can figure all that out from the previous episode. I already explained arguments in the first episode, which is basically to pass variables to different functions and methods that needs them. On to loops. There are different types of loops. There's a while loop and a do-while loop. They're basically the same, but the while loop, it does the check before it goes and runs the code inside of it, and the do-while does the check after it runs the code. For loops are different where they have a variable definition, a check area, and a place where you can run code after the loop has ran. For in is for if you wanted to check data inside of an array. What you do is you put the variable that you want the array data to go into, and then in with the array at the end. Inside of Xcode, we're going to make a new project, a command line tool, and name it loops. Inside the loops project, we're going to open loops.m, remove the sample code that comes with every single template. And we're going to add a variable which we're going to check, which is going to be int I equals 0. I'm going to make it 0 first so that we get a little loop before it equals whatever we choose. And then we're going to type in while, and using Xcode autocomplete, we're going to type in condition I does not equal 2. That means until it equals 2, we're going to continue the loop. Do an log to log out the value of 2 at every time the loop runs, so we can see what the value changes to as we go on. And then we're going to make I increment. And we're going to build and run it using the little console and see what the result is. And you see it went from 0 to 1 and stopped. It stopped because I now equals 2. The other type of loop is let's make I equals 0 again because it equals 2 now. And we're going to do a do while, which is do and it's log %d I plus plus I does not equal 2, and then end this. You can't like just leave it alone, it would get an error like this. So we're just going to add that in there and build and test. Next, we're going to teach you how to go throughout arrays of information. An array basically is a whole entire object that contains a whole lot of other objects in it. And this one, we're going to have some strings in it. And we're going to go throughout the strings, and we're going to log them out into the console. We're going to make an array by array, an array equals array with objects, and then we're going to just define the different objects. Like we're going to do fruits because that's what a whole lot of different things do in examples of arrays. So like apples, oranges, grapes, bananas. There, let's make this so that we can see it. And then we're going to end the definition of arguments with a nil. Close this off, end it, and go on to the next line. Which here, I'm going to go ahead and explain how to do for loops. In for loops, you get the definition, the check, and the after loop runs. So, we're going to go for int I equals 0. We're defining an integer with which is named I. Well, let's make it D so we don't get any interceptions if possible. And then we're going to make it equal 0. Now we're going to check, because we ended that one, we're going to check if D is less than an array count. That's basically continue on unless it is bigger than an array, the count of an array. And then we're going to do D++, which would make it so it increments every time it ends. Going to continue with a code enclosure, and then we're going to log out the value of the object where D is. So an array object at index D. And that would go throughout all the grapes, bananas, apples, oranges, and log them out in order whenever it builds. And there we go. It logged out all those different objects in the array, one after another. And now, let's go ahead and explain the for in. The for in, basically what you do is you define what the object is, like you can define it as ID for any object, or in a string for a specific object, which we know that these are all strings, so we might as well just make it the object which it really is. And then we're going to name it the object, just for naming. And then we're going to do the for in, which is basically for each, like in PHP, but it's in Goto. So we're going to do for the object in an array. And that would basically go throughout the whole entire array and make it equal make the object equal the index of that array. Kind of like what we did here, but automatic and a little bit easier to write down. Now we're going to log out, and it's log for in, just so we know that this one is actually from this call, the object, and that would do the logging out whenever we compile. And you see here, it goes throughout all the objects in that array and put for in before it. Let's say that you wanted to go throughout the array using a while loop. You can do that in a few different ways. You can do what we did here with the I, and instead of logging out the I, log out the object at the index and do the check to see if it's more or less than the object count. Or you can do an enumerator. You can do an enumerator and go throughout each and every object step by step. To do that, we're going to define the enumerator as the enumerator. And we're going to make it equal an array object enumerator, and that would get an enumerator of the array, while the object equals the enumerator next object. And then we're going to log out, log the object, and that would go throughout the array with the enumerator. And as you can see, it works perfectly. The reason why this works is because whenever it gets to the end of the objects in the enumerator, it returns a null object, and the null object equals no, basically. So because of this is a condition check, it equals no, so it ends. Now let's get to the last thing, which is Goto. Basically what a Goto is you can send runtime to a specific point in the code. You can use it to clean up like objects in the function, or handle errors in the function. I'm going to go ahead and give you an example code on how to use this. Inside of Xcode, we're going to make a new project, a command line tool, and we're going to name it Goto, just to keep it the theme. So I have goto.m. We're going to define a void function and name it test Goto, and continue on. Inside this function, what we're going to do is we're going to implement a error handling and a cleanup. That way, if an error happens, we're going to clean it up and display the error. And if no error happens, it's just going to clean up. We're going to define a string, and we're going to allocate it and initialize it so that we can release it for the cleanup. That way, it's example. Normally, you would use like a string method to get an object that is already auto-released and will release whenever it's done using it. But for this example, we're just going to use one that's not auto-released. In a string, the string equals in a string new. Now what we're going to do is we're going to check for an error. If an error, we're just going to do 1 equals 1, just for testing, because we're not going to have time to make errors happen. And then we're going to do Goto error. And now let's go ahead and define what the error does in the Goto section, which is right here. That starts the Goto for error. And we're going to log an error occurred. And then we're going to go ahead and go to cleanup after the error occurred, so that it stays clean and doesn't cause crashes on their machine or memory take up. Let's go and do it with cap, just for fun. Clean up, and then I'm going to release the string, and we might as well log that we're releasing the string, so we know that it is. And then we're going to the string release, and we might as well define this at the end of the code so that it cleans up after itself as well if there's no error. Now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and run the function inside of the main in that, and we can run the test. You see an error occurred, and it released a string. Let's make it so there's no error by making it 12 or whatever. And it just released a string. That's it for Coco Maker Episode 4. I'm James.
I'm Eduardo.
And I'm Karl.
Have a nice day, and enjoy programming.